everybody, I'm Jules Augment, this is my new channel and I'm going to talk about books. About cool books, about annoying books, about books of all kinds. I will be reading them, commenting on them, doing stuff with them, whatever comes to my mind, and I hope you'll enjoy watching me do whatever. Apologies for the accent, obviously I'm not a native speaker and I'll do my utmost to completely confuse you as to what accent this is supposed to be. People have told me that it keeps fluctuating depending on rage level, on who I have talked to lately, and what kind of movie I've been watching. So prepare for a complete mess. Yeah, and have fun with my first video. So, hello everybody. I think I told a few people that I would be doing this. I'm not really sure if this is going anywhere, we will see. The thing is that I have to read Robinson Crusoe for my English course at the moment. I find it incredibly tedious and yeah, I know it's world literature, it's one of the first novels ever written. It has all of this colonialism shit going on. Still, if you look at it from a modern perspective, the perspective of somebody who is a modern person who learned a lot about storytelling after all of these years of writing and reading books, I have to say there's some things in Robinson Crusoe that would usually just like let me drop the book and never pick it up again. I have to read it. I will, well, make you suffer along with me. Just the setup, Robinson Crusoe, he grew up as a middle-class person. His dad told him that's the way to go. He didn't listen. He decided to run off, to go onto a sailing boat, become a sailor, have some fun, have some adventures. What happened was the very first time he sets foot on a boat, first of all, he's incredibly sick the whole time. Secondly, they end up in a storm. Almost everybody aboard gets killed. He doesn't learn his lesson and go back to his dad, but he decides to board another ship. So what happens when he boards another ship? Well, he is captured, he is enslaved, and well, now we end up in this situation. However, to cut short this melancholy part of our story, because he never tells us the very adventurous things, I will get back to that later. Our ship being disabled and 3 of our men killed and 8 wounded, we were obliged to yield and were carried all prisoners into Sallee, a port belonging to the Moors. Obviously, he is enslaved by the Moors, because that's just what happens. The usage I had there was not so dreadful as at first I apprehended, nor was I carried up the country to the Emperor's court, as the rest of our men were, but was kept by the captain of the rover as his proper prize and made his slave, being young and nimble and fit for business, and obviously also being like the super cool hero of our story because he's just so special. At this surprising change of my circumstances from a merchant to a miserable slave, I was perfectly overwhelmed, and now I looked back upon my father's prophetic discourse to me that I should be miserable and have none to relieve me, which I thought was now so effectually brought to pass that I could not be worse, for now the hand of heaven had overtaken me, and I was undone without redemption. But alas, this was but a taste of the misery I was to go through, as will appear in the sequel of this story. What he does here, like what Daniel Defoe does here, is foreshadowing. Usually foreshadowing should be subtle, it can be between the lines, it can be a little hint here, a little hint there, but he goes in almost in every single paragraph and he tells you that, you know, further down the line it's going to be so much worse and I'm going to be such a miserable wretch and everything is going to be bad and... Okay, we got it. There's something bad happening to you at some point later in the story, we've got it. As my new patron or master had taken me home to his house, so I was in hopes that he would take me with him when he went to sea again, believing that it would some time or other be his fate to be taken by a Spanish or Portugal man-o'-war, and that then I should be set at liberty, obviously. But this hope of mine was soon taken away, for when he went to sea, he left me on shore to look after his little garden and to do the common drudgery of slaves about his house. Yeah, sure, looking after the garden is such a mess, and it's such a, oh my god, it's such slave work. And when he came home again from his cruise, he ordered me to lie in the cabin to look after his ship. Oh my god! He actually leaves you alone! And to your own devices. Here I meditated nothing but my escape, and what method I might take to effect it, but found no way that had the least probability in it. Nothing presented to make the supposition of it rational, for I had nobody to communicate it to that would embark with me. No fellow slave, no Englishman, Irishman, or Scotsman, there but myself. So that for 2 years, though, I often pleased myself with the imagination, yet I never had the least encouraging prospect of putting it in practice. So he's there for 2 years, looking after the garden, tending the boat, not being misused, not being tortured. But yeah, he's a slave, sure. After about 2 years, an odd circumstance presented itself, which put the old thought of making some attempt for my liberty again in my head. My patron, lying at home longer than usual without fitting out his ship, which, as I heard, was for want of money, he used constantly, once or twice a week, sometimes oftener if the weather was fair, to take the ship's pinnace and go out into the road a-fishing. And as he always took me and young Moresco with him to row the boat, we made him very merry, and I proved very dexterous in catching fish. Insomuch that sometimes he would send me with a Moor, one of his kinsmen, and the youth, the Moresco, as they called him, to catch a dish of fish for him. So he actually sends 2 guys, who are his servants or slaves or whatever, out with one of his men. And both of them are young, so they should be able to overcome one person, but I don't think so. It happened one time that going a-fishing in a calm morning, a fog rose so thick that, though we were not half a league from the shore, we lost sight of it, and rowing we knew not whither or which way. We laboured all day and all the next night, and when the morning came we found we had pulled off to sea instead of pulling in for the shore. Well, damn it. And that we were at least 2 leagues from the shore. Oh. However, we got well in again. So this is all for nothing. They get lost and then they come back. However, we got well in again, though with a great deal of labour and some danger, for the wind began to blow pretty fresh in the morning, but we were all very hungry. Sure. But our patron, warned by this disaster, this isn't a disaster. Seriously, if you've ever been on a sailing boat, a little bit of wind and being carried in the wrong direction, that's just normal. But our patron, warned by this disaster, resolved to take more care of himself for the future, and having lying by him the longboat of our English ship that he had taken, he resolved he would not go a-fishing any more without a compass and some provision. So he ordered the carpenter of his ship, who also was an English slave, to build a little stateroom or cabin in the middle of the longboat, like that of a barge, with a place to stand behind it to steer and haul home the main sheet. The room before for a hand or 2 to stand and work the sails. She sailed with what we call a shoulder of mutton sail, and the boom jibed over the top of the cabin, which lay very snug and low, and had in it room for him to lie with a slave or 2, and a table to eat on. Wait, lay with a slave or 2. I don't think he means what he's saying here, but still, this is odd. Also, do you notice, these extremely run-on sentences? There's sentences, and they go on for 5 or 6 miles, and there's commas aplenty, and there's semicolons aplenty, and it's just oh my god. Okay, so he's got this fancy boat now. We went frequently out with this boat a-fishing, so we're going fishing again, and as I was most dexterous to catch fish for him, he never went without me. He uses the word dexterous twice for the same thing, in paragraphs that are not far enough apart for me to have forgotten about the first time he used it. It happened that he had appointed to go out in his boat, either for pleasure or for fish, with 2 or 3 Moors of some distinction in that place, and for whom he had provided extraordinarily, and had therefore sent on board the boat overnight a larger store of provisions than ordinary. So we've got extraordinarily and ordinary in one sentence, which is also great. And had ordered me to, this is still one sentence, and had ordered me to get ready 3 fusees with powder and shot, which were on board his ship, for that they designed some sport of fowling as well as fishing. So I'm going to have a look now. This is like, how many words are in that sentence, because this is something that really interests me now. So this is like 1, 2, 3. 83 words in one single sentence. I rest my case. I got all things ready as he had directed, and waited the next morning with the boat washed clean, her ancient and pendants out, and everything to accommodate his guests, when by and by my patron came on board alone, and told me his guests had put off going from some business that fell out, and ordered me with the man and boy as usual to go out with the boat and catch them some fish, for that his friends were to sup at his house, and commanded that as soon as I got some fish I should bring it home to his house, all which I prepared to do. This again is one sentence. This moment my former notions of deliverance started into my thoughts, for now I found I was likely to have a little ship at my command. And my master being gone, I prepared to furnish myself not for fishing business, but for a voyage, though I knew not, neither did I so much as consider, whither I should steer. Anywhere to get out of that place was my desire. So, do you notice that, like the master here, like his boss, owner, whatever, he just leaves him to it. Tells him to, like, yeah, go out with the boat and go fishing and have some fun and bring home some dinner. And he doesn't notice a thing. How dumb is that man? My first contrivance was to make a pretence to speak to this Moor to get something for our subsistence on board, for I told him we must not presume to eat of our patron's bread. He said that was true, so he brought a large basket of rusk or biscuit and 3 jars of fresh water into the boat. I knew where my patron's case of bottles stood, which it was evident by the make were taken out of some English prize, and I conveyed them into the boat while the Moor was on shore, as if they had been there before for our master. I conveyed also a great lump of beeswax into the boat, which weighed about 1/2 weight, with a parcel of twine or thread, a hatchet, a saw, and a hammer, all of which were of great use to us afterwards, especially the wax, to make candles. Another trick I tried upon him, which he innocently came into also. His name was Ishmael, which they call Muley or Murley, so I called him Murley. I have no idea. Murley, said I, our patron's guns are on board the boat. Can you not get a little powder and shot? It may be we may kill some alchemies, a fowl like our curlews, for ourselves. For I know he keeps the gunner's stores in the ship. Yeah, sure. There's like, you've got the master, you've got his like servant, the Moor, and this guy doesn't catch on when he asks him to provide some powder and shot for the guns aboard. What? I'll bring some. And accordingly he brought a great leather pouch, which held 1.5 pounds of powder, or rather more, and another with shot, that had 5 or 6 pounds with some bullets, and put all into the boat. At the same time I had found some powder of my master's in the great cabin, with which I filled one of the large bottles in the case, which was almost empty, pouring what was in it into another. This is completely superfluous. Nobody needs this information. This is going on and on and on and on, and nothing is happening really. The wind blew from the north-northeast, which was contrary to my desire, for it had blown southerly. I had been sure to have made the coast of Spain, and at least reached to the Bay of Cadiz. But my resolutions were, blow which way it would, I would be gone from that horrid place where I was, and leave the rest to fate. After we had fished some time and caught nothing, for when I had fish on my hook I would not pull them up, that he might not see them, I said to the Moor, "This will not do, our master will not be thus served, we must stand farther off." He, thinking no harm, agreed, and being in the head of the boat, set the sails, and as I had the helm, I ran the boat out near a league farther, and then brought her to, as if I would fish, when, giving the boy the helm, I stepped forward to where the Moor was, and making... So, this is all like rambling. Also, even if this is just one of these side boats, I'm not really sure you could sail that single-handedly, which is kind of what they are doing here. Like, it seems like there's only 2 people working at one time, indicating that one of them is doing the sailing and one of them is keeping the helm and one is fishing. I took him by surprise with my arm under his waist and tossed him clear overboard into the sea. So he gets rid of the Moor finally. After 2 years, they've been doing this for ages. They've been out there, the 3 of them, the trio of them, him and the Moresco and the Moor, and they haven't got rid of the Moor up until now. Why? He rose immediately, for he swam like a cork, and called to me, begged to be taken in, told me he would go all over the world with me. He swam so strong after the boat that he would have reached me very quickly there, being but little wind. Upon which I stepped into the cabin, and fetching one of the fowling pieces, I presented it at him and told him I had done him no hurt, and if he would be quiet, I would do him none. But, said I, you swim well enough to reach to the shore, and the sea is calm. Make the best of your way to the shore, and I will do you no harm. So we've got this do you no harm, do you no harm, do you no harm thing. So he turned himself about and swam for the shore, and I make no doubt but he reached it with ease, for he was an excellent swimmer. So fine, we don't even have a dead Moor. When he was gone, I turned to the boy, whom they called Xury, and said to him, "Xury, if you will be faithful to me, I'll make you a great man. But if you will not stroke your face to be true to me, that is, swear by Mahomet and his father's beard, I must throw you into the sea too." The boy smiled in my face and spoke so innocently that I could not distrust him, and swore to be faithful to me and go all over the world with me. We've got a lot of description, a lot of description, a lot of description. At some point, they get into problems again. As I had been one voyage to this coast before, I knew very well that the islands of the Canaries and the Cape de Verde Islands also lay not far off from the coast. But as I had no instruments to take an observation to know what latitude we were in, not exactly knowing, or at least remembering what latitude they were in, I knew not where to look for them, or when to stand off to sea towards them. Yeah, well, it's shit if you don't know your stuff. Otherwise, I might now easily have found some of these islands. No! You have no idea. This is like all of these mumble jumble, many words are just saying that he just set out and tried to flee from his master without having a fucking idea where he's going. He doesn't have a map. He doesn't have any idea where he is. He has no idea about sailing. Like, about actually sailing and navigating a ship. So yeah, he's fucked. My hope was that if I stood along this coast till I came to that part where the English traded, I should find some of their vessels upon their usual sign of trade that would relieve and take us in. Obviously, because he is English, he is like the super cool Englishman on his journey, on his adventure, and yeah, everything is going to be bad later, though. He thinks he saw the Pico of Tenerife, being the high top of the mountain Tenerife, and had a great mind to venture out in hopes of reaching thither. But having tried twice, I was forced in again by contrary winds, the sea also going too high for my little vessel. So this is a continuous process of always like, okay, there could be something that we could actually do. Oh no, we can't. So he doesn't even take that step. He sets off to take that step. It's like he lifts his foot off the ground like half an inch and then he decides to retreat. This is the way this storytelling happens here. and it's annoying. Several times I was obliged to land for fresh water after we had left this place, and once in particular, being early in the morning, we came to an anchor under a little point of land which was pretty high, and the tide beginning to flow, we lay still to go farther in. Xuri, whose eyes were more about him than it seems mine were, calls softly to me and tells me that we had best go farther off the shore, for, says he, look, yonder lies a dreadful monster on the side of that hillock, fast asleep. Yeah. I looked where he pointed and saw a dreadful monster. So, here's the thing. I know they might not have had a thesaurus at this time of, like, in that period, 1700 something, I will have to look that up later. And they might not have had that. But I am pretty sure you can describe this without using the exact same words twice in one fucking sentence. So, and saw a dreadful monster indeed, for it was a terrible great lion that lay on the side of the shore. So, explain to me, why, in this exact moment, did Defoe not go for, I looked where he pointed and saw a great lion that lay on the side of the shore? It works. Wow, you can just leave the dreadful monster out and it still works. Awesome. Under the shade of a piece of the hill that hung, as it were, a little over him. Well, this is completely superfluous and nobody knows it, and it's like, leave it out. Xuri, says I, you shall on shore and kill him. Xuri looked frightened and said, me kill, he eat me at one mouth. So I know this was a thing for a long time, that authors, writers in history used these pigeonized versions of English or other languages of Western European countries to depict the colonized people. Here's the thing. Xuri has been hanging out with Robinson Crusoe at this point for more than 2 years. And he is not stupid. He has not been shown as stupid. So, in a little more than 2 years, I would expect this kid to have picked up enough English from his co-worker / co-slave to not speak that way. This is like pure colonization, infatuation, historical subtext shit, and I don't like it. However, I said no more to the boy, but bade him lie still, and I took our biggest gun, which was almost musket bore, and loaded it with a good charge of powder and with 2 slugs, and laid it down. Then I loaded another gun, yada yada yada. He goes on shore, he kills the lion. It turns out that Xuri is actually better at skinning an animal than Robinson is, which is another colonization thing, because, yeah, skinning an animal, that's a wild thing to do. That's something that the natives do. That's something that the wild people have to do because they are not as cool as we are and not as developed as we are. Social Darwinism, my ass. So they go a little further, they actually meet a native tribe. I began to see that the land was inhabited, and in 2 or 3 places, as we sailed by, we saw people stand upon the shore to look at us. We could also perceive they were quite black and naked. Colonization. I was once inclined to have gone on shore to them, but Xuri was my better counselor and saying to me, no go, because he still can't speak English. However, I hauled in nearer the shore that I might talk to them, and I found they ran along the shore by me a good way. I observed they had no weapons in their hand except one, who had a long slender stick, which Xuri said was a lance, and that they could throw them a great way with good aim. So, at this point, question. Where does Xuri know the word lance from? Lance is a very Western word, I believe. So, assuming Xuri can speak not enough English to form a coherent sentence, which up to now we have been held to believe, I don't think this is this is possible. I don't think this is happening. I don't think this works. They beckoned me to stop my boat and they would fetch me some meat. By the way, I have no idea how he can distinguish from their like signing what they are doing, because they can't speak English and he can't speak their language, so they have to be signing in some way. And how exactly do you sign that you are going to bring meat? Because I think it's easy to sign food, but meat, I don't know. We made signs of thanks to them, for we had nothing to make them amends. So they're going like this? I don't know. What do you do for thank you? Especially with people who might not follow the same customs as you. We had nothing to make them amends, but an opportunity offered that very instant to oblige them wonderfully, obviously. Now here, in walks our English hero. For while we were lying by the shore, came two mighty creatures, one pursuing the other as we took it, with great fury from the mountains towards the sea. Whether it was the male pursuing the female, or whether they were in sport or in rage, we could not tell. So there's a lot of yada 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 about these two things, which we, up to this point, have no idea what animals they are. I fired and shot him directly in the head. Immediately he sank down into the water, but rose instantly and plunged up and down as if he were struggling for life, and so indeed he was. The finest storytelling here, like the finest description. He sank down into the water, but rose instantly, as if he were struggling for life, and so indeed he was. Okay. Immediately he made to the shore, but between the wound which was his mortal hurt and the strangling of the water, he died just before he reached the shore. Apart from the fact that we have the shore twice in one sentence, which could have been replaced with it, just in one of these instances, I also don't know what that is about. Is that supposed to like create tension because it's resolved much too quickly to do that? We have this like, oh, there might be a threat. No, actually there isn't. Oh, it might actually come after us. No, it actually doesn't. It just dies. Okay. It is impossible to express the astonishment of these poor creatures, that's the people on land, at the noise and fire of my gun. Some of them were even ready to die for fear and fell down as dead with the very terror. But when they saw the creature dead and sunk in the water, and that I made signs to them to come to the shore, they took heart and came, and began to search for the creature. Ah, the English hero. I found him by his blood staining in the water and by the help of a rope which I slung round him and gave the Negroes to haul. So, what is he doing exactly? He binds this thing with the rope and then he like goes ashore and gives it to them, or is he tossing it to the shore? Because this is not what is written here. I assume he's tossing it, by the way. And the Negroes held up their hands with admiration to think what it was I had killed him. To thank what it was I had killed him with. Okay, so they thank the mighty shotgun now. The other creature, frightened with the flash of fire and the noise of the gun, swam on shore and ran up directly to the mountains from whence it came. Nor could I at the distance know what it was. I found quickly the Negroes wished to eat the flesh of this creature, so I was willing to have them take it as a favor from me, which when I made signs to them that they might take him, they were very thankful for. They already have it? Like he tossed, I assume tossed, the rope to the shore, they pulled it in, it is on the shore now, he's still on his damn boat, they have it. So Xuri goes ashore with the jars and filled them all three with water, and the women were as naked as the men. This is not related in any way, this is just two subsequent sentences, which is like, yeah, sure. I didn't think that the women were clothed in a society where everybody is naked, but okay, state it, because you're a chauvinistic ass. I was now furnished with roots and corn, such as it was, and water, and leaving my friendly negroes, I made forward for about 11 days more, without offering to go near the shore, till I saw the land run out a great length into the sea at about the distance of 4 or 5 leagues before me. And the sea being very calm, I kept a large offing to make this point. At her length, doubling the point at about 2 leagues from the land, I saw plainly land on the other side, to seaward. Then I concluded, as it was most certain indeed, that this was the Cap de Verde, and those the islands called from thence Cap de Verde Island. Ooh! However, they were at a great distance, and I could not well tell what I had best to do. For if I should be taken with a fresh of wind, I might neither reach one or other. Oh dear. Perhaps you should have brought a chart or a map, or actually learned your trade, because you didn't. In this dilemma, as I was very pensive, I stepped into the cabin and sat down, Xury having the helm, when on a sudden the boy cried out, "Master, master, a ship with a sail!" Speaking in a coherent sentence. And the foolish boy was frightened out of his wits, thinking it must needs be some of his master's ships sent to pursue us. But I knew we were far enough out of their reach. I jumped out of the cabin and immediately saw not only the ship, but that it was the Portuguese ship, and, as I thought, was bound to the coast of Guinea for negroes. But when I observed the course she steered, I was soon convinced they were bound some other way, and did not design to come any nearer to the shore, upon which I stretched out to sea as much as... This is like run, lots of words, nothing really of interest. So he ends up being taken in by the Portuguese. They are super nice to him. They take him over to Brazil, and he sets up a plantation there. So from slave he becomes a slave owner, really. So he has a plantation, a sugar plantation in Brazil, and he is doing quite well there. He has some money sent over from England. There's quite a lot of blah blah about that, like him getting the money via several people who have to give it to each other, and nobody thinks about taking it for himself. So they make a lot of fuss about that money coming in there, and he could have lived happily ever after in Brazil, but obviously, because there's this really bad thing to come, he's an idiot, and his friends persuade him to set off and get some slaves. Wow. So he goes a-sailing again to get some slaves. And then he is shipwrecked. And then the actual story starts, the part of the story that everybody knows, with him being shipwrecked and him being on that island and all of this. So we will skip forward to the point where he is actually there doing his thing on the island. And I will let you partake of one of my personal pet peeves in this book. I was now landed and safe on shore, and began to look up and thank God that my life was saved. By the way, this is a story about finding God. This is the whole point of Robinson Crusoe. It's about this chap finding God. That my life was saved. In a case wherein there was some minutes before scarce any room to hope, I believe it is impossible to express to the life what the ecstasies and transports of the soul are when it is so saved, as I may say, out of the very grave. And I do not wonder now at the custom, when a malefactor who has the halter around his neck is tied up and just going to be turned off, and has a reprieve brought to him. I say I do not wonder that they bring a surgeon with it to let him blood, that very moment they tell him of it, that the surprise may not drive the animal spirits from the heart and overwhelm him. For sudden joys, like griefs, confound at first. So he goes up on this incredible tangent of comparing himself to somebody who's just about to be hanged, and then he's his sentence is withdrawn, and he is super happy about it. And obviously, from a medical point of view, this is complete bullshit with bleeding and the stuff. But I will find another book to talk about medical shit at some point. I walked about on the shore, lifting up my hands and my whole being, as I may say, wrapped up in a contemplation of my deliverance, making 1,000 gestures and motions which I cannot describe, reflecting upon all my comrades that were drowned, and there should not be one soul saved but myself. So he is on the beach, dancing, and thanking the heavens that he survived while his comrades died. By the way, the chapter names are just genius. Chapter 4 is called First Weeks on the Island, and yes, we're up to chapter 4. So he decides that he has to get some stuff from the ship. He goes out, he gets some stuff from the ship. A couple hours or so later, he decides he has to get more stuff from the ship. So he goes out again. My next work was to view the country and seek a proper place for my habitation, and where to stow my goods to secure them from whatever might happen. Where I was, I knew not, whether on the continent or on an island, whether inhabited or not inhabited, whether in danger of wild beasts or not. There was a hill not above a mile from me, which rose up very steep and high, and which seemed to overtop some other hills, which lay as in a ridge from it northward. I took out one of the fowling pieces, and one of the pistols, and a horn of powder, and thus armed I travelled for discovery up to the top of that hill, where after I had with great labour and difficulty got to the top. Great labour and difficulty. Keep that in mind, put a pin there, because if you ever get round to reading this in its entirety, you will find that he does everything with great labour and difficulty. I saw my fate to my great affliction, viz., that I was on an island environed every way with the sea, no land to be seen except some rocks which lay a great way off, and 2 small islands less than this, which lay about 3 leagues to the west. I found also that the islands I was in was barren, and, as I saw good reason to believe, uninhabited except by wild beasts, of whom, however, I saw none. Yet I saw abundance of fowls, but knew not their kinds, neither when I killed them could I tell what was fit for food and what not. Well, usually if you can kill it, you can eat it. At my coming back, I shot a great bird, which I saw sitting upon a tree on the side of a great wood. So we have a tree and a great wood, and the island is barren. I believe it was the first gun that had been fired ever since the creation of the world, like on this island. I had no sooner fired than from all parts of the wood there arose an innumerable number of fowls of many sorts, making a confused screaming and crying, and every one according to his usual note, but not one of them of any kind that I knew. As for the creature I killed, I took it to be a kind of hawk, its colour and beak resembling it, but it had no talons or claws more than common. Its flesh was carrion and fit for nothing. It's a bird. It will taste like chicken. By the way, he decides he has to get more stuff from the ship. I now begin to consider that I might get a great many things out of the ship, which would be useful to me, and particularly some of the rigging and sails, and such other things as might come to land, and I resolved to make another voyage on board the vessel, if possible. The next day I made another voyage, and now, having plundered the ship of what was portable and fit to hand out, I began with the cables. Cutting the great cable into pieces, such as I could move, I got 2 cables and a hawser on shore, with all the ironwork I could get, and having cut down the spritsail yard and the mizzen yard and everything I could to make a large raft, I loaded it with all these heavy goods and came away. But my good luck began now to leave me, for this raft was so unwieldy and so overladen that, after I had entered the little cove where I had landed the rest of my goods, not being able to guide it so handily as I did the other, it overset and threw me and all my cargo into the water. By the way, this just happens before he goes on land again. As for myself, it was no great harm, because, yeah, sure, we always have this, oh my god, danger. By the way, no. So he dumps the iron into the cave, obviously, gets rid of that in this unfortunate way. So he's now 13 days on shore, and the only thing he has done is get stuff from the ship. So he finds money, some European coins, some Brazil, some pieces of 8, some gold and some silver. I smiled to myself at the sight of this money. "O drug," said I aloud, "what art thou good for? Thou art not worth to me. No, not the taking of the ground. One of those knives is worth all this heap. I have no manner of use for thee. E'en remain where thou art, and go to the bottom as a creature whose life is not worth saying. By the way, he just starts to speak like Shakespeare. This is 1700 something. People did not say thou, unless they read scripture. So why is he talking in scripture now? I have no idea. I will never find out. My thoughts were now wholly employed about securing myself against either savages, if any should appear, or wild beast, if anywhere in the island. He's been there for 13 days. If there had been a thing that wanted to eat him, it would already have done it. I soon found the place I was in was not fit for my settlement, because it was upon a low moorish ground near the sea. Well, gee, you've been there for 13 days. So he goes somewhere else, finds a place where he can set up his abode. Having now fixed my habitation, I found it absolutely necessary to provide a place to make a fire in. So he has been living there for 13 days or more. I guess this is like 5 days later now, because he has like built his whole cabin thing now. And he has not made a fire. Oh, he is getting like super like whiny and emo now. I had a dismal prospect of my condition, for as I was not cast away upon that island without being driven, as is said, by a violent storm, quite out of the course of our intended voyage, and a great way, viz., some hundreds of leagues out of the ordinary course of the trade of mankind, I had great reason to consider it as a determination of heaven that at this desolate place, and in this desolate manner, I should end my life. With this, I conclude this video. Thank you for watching this, and if you liked it, if you enjoyed it, think about giving me a subscribe or a like down there. I hope I'll see you around next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay alive, and enjoy life.